Hey everyone, I think that we need a little bit more review on some of these problems before the test. The problems I'm going to do with you are not problems that you will find in your book, but please use these if you would like to help you get ready for the test. So again, these are just review problems, but I am looking at a problem from my teacher book in lesson 6-2, and we're dealing with parallelograms. So before we begin this problem, we really want to think through the properties of parallelograms, and I encourage you to carefully think through the properties of whatever shape you're dealing with each time before you start a problem. So when we're dealing with parallelograms, we know that the diagonals bisect each other. That's the only thing we know about the diagonals of parallelograms. They bisect each other. We know that opposite sides are congruent and parallel. Same is true over here, congruent and parallel. We know that opposite angles are congruent, and we know that consecutive angles are supplementary because they are same side interior angles running along the transversal that crosses two parallel lines. Now, if you didn't follow all that, rewind the video and think through that with me. But now let's start applying those properties. We want to find these measures, and I know that you can already see the answers, but the important thing is how we work through the problem. So we're going to use the information that we're given and the characteristics of parallelograms that we know to solve. So the first thing they want us to solve is YZ. Well, we see that YZ is 8A minus 4. We know that YZ has to be congruent in a parallelogram to the side across from it. So it's going to be congruent to 6A plus 10. So let's set that up. 8A minus 4 is equal to 6A plus 10. And we're going to subtract 6A from both sides and be left with 2A. Add 4 to both sides, 14. So A is going to equal 7. Now, of course, we have to plug that back in because they did not ask what is A equal to. They asked what YZ's length is. So 8 times 7 is 56 minus 4 is 52. All right, now let's look at the angle they ask us to find. The measure of angle Z. Well, we do not have the opposite angle to set congruent to this in an equation, but we do have the consecutive angle that is supplementary to it. So if we add these two up, they are going to be equal to 180 because remember, they are same side interior angles on this transversal that crosses two parallel lines. So if you look down here, let me move my phone. I have already worked this if I can find it with the phone. There we go. Okay, so I said 9b plus 2, which is the first angle, plus 18b minus 11, which is the second angle, equals 180. And then 9b plus 18b is 27b minus 9 equals 180. Let's see, and then I divided by 27 from both sides, and b equals 7. So again, we need to go back up here. They're asking for the measure of angle Z. So we have to plug b back into the equation, which is 7. So 9 times 7 is 63, plus 2 is 65, and that's how we get our answer. And let's look at one more that I looked at in class with the first class. I don't know if we'll get to it with the second class, but let's look at this parallelogram. In this parallelogram, they tell us that DE is equal to 74 millimeters. DG is equal to 31 millimeters. The angle of FCD is 42 degrees. Okay. Now, remember, we need to bring everything we know about a parallelogram to this problem. And we know it's a parallelogram because of this sign right here. The problem tells us in parallelogram CDEF. Remember this for your test, just in case you have a question like that on the test that gives you that as your only information. All right, so they want to know what the measure of CF is. Well, we know that in a parallelogram, opposite sides are congruent. Opposite sides are also parallel. We know that opposite angles are congruent. So F is congruent to D, C is congruent to E. We know that the diagonals bisect each other. Now, y'all, I'm telling you these things off the top of my head, and I've really had to study to get to this point of remembering them all. To be able to walk through these lessons quickly with you. So I'm encouraging you to do the same. You've really got to have them memorized. Not word for word, but memorized for understanding. Okay, so looking at CF, we know it's the same as DE, so that's going to be 74. Looking at the measure of angle EFC, let's find EFC. EFC, that's this angle right here, and it is not congruent to C. C would be congruent to E, F would be congruent to D. But we know that F and C are consecutive angles and going to be supplementary. So this is simply going to be 180 minus 42, which equals 138. They're supplementary because this is parallel to this, and C and F are same side interior angles on the transversal that crosses two parallel lines. All right, the last one is the measure of DF, which is this diagonal. We know that DG is bisected by the other, DF is bisected by the other diagonal, which is CE. So if the top part of it is 31, the lower part of it must also be 31. But now they want to know the whole thing. So 31 plus 31 is 62 millimeters. Okay, that's it, and I will do another video.